There it goes. How you doing?
Doing great, thank you. Wonderful place to be at tonight.
All right, welcome. Hey Dan, how you doing?
Good.
Good to see you.
Enjoying the food?
Say hello to posterity.
Hello there, I'm here.
Oh,
So somebody brought a great ham.
yes.
I'm really
actually,
enjoying the ham.
Actually, two. Two hams.
Well, there's one behind the camera.
This is the second ham. How you doing, dude? Say hello to posterity.
Posterity, hello.
Very good. All right. Say hi.
This fried chicken is really good.
Oh, great.
Who made that fried chicken?
The egg.
Very good.
But what came first? The chicken, the fried chicken?
And what do we have here? We have a wonderful duo here.
Yes.
Wow.
We've got nice plates, don't we, Jude?
Nice Ewok
Welcome.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to shoot the table. Wow, who brought that bread?
My ears off. No, it's huge.
That's amazing.
Do you want to try a meatball too with gravy?
Hello.
Hello.
I'm shooting the table.
Someone's fun this morning.
Oh, here's a couple of gentlemen of Verona. Hi. Say hello to posterity.
Hello. Hey, Historical Society.
Look at this beautiful table set up. Wow. Love it. Oh, and there's the famous Barbara Allen. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Buzz.
And there's Kimmy. Hello, say hello.
Hello, Buzz. How are you?
I'm good, I'm good. Now you're famous. What's your name, sir?
I'm Jamie.
Hi, Jamie. I already shot your mom, but now we have both of you.
Oh, really?
Hello, gentlemen.
Hi.
Say hello to posterity.
Hello, posterity.
Thank you. Oh, here's the famous Neil Shaw with wine. He knows how to celebrate our program.
Can I meet him?
Yes, I'll introduce you. Hello.
Julie Rosa.
Yes, of course. I'm going to even shoot your plate. Oh, wow. Very nice choice. Nice choices.
Yes, nice choices.
Hello.
Bonjour, bonsoir.
Oh, very nice. All right, and there's Scotty, otherwise known as Beam Me Up. Oh,
Yeah.
Look up and say smile. He can't look up. No. That was
all right.
as good as you got.
That's it. Okay. Let's see if we can bring this to order. Can you give me a little more? Can you? That's it. Okay. How about we find a seat? I have some important announcements to make. Okay. Couple items before we start. First of all, my name's Buzz Tarlow. How many know me? All right, that's not too bad. Okay, I was joking tonight. How many people saw the ham at the table? I told people I brought 2 hams. Okay, so we're going to run a raffle. We need to get members. Ann Chris, who is among the missing. Is Ann Chris in the room? Oh, want to grab the B camera and start videoing? She's going to video, and what you want to do is interrupt her by joining the Historical Society. So she's right there at the camera station, looking totally lost with that camera. And no, she's found it, and she will start shooting. Next, I have an announcement from the Friends of the Topanga Library. How many love the library? Okay, I do too. So the Friends of the Library have a big book sale. And that's Saturday from 9 to 11 for members and 11 to 4 to the public. So if you're a member, you get to get in there and get the good stuff, the Stephen King novels. And then from 11 to 4, it's open to the public, cash only and exact change only. So if you go in there with a $100 bill, I don't know what they're going to do. So that's that announcement. And we have a raffle. How many bought raffle tickets? Oh my God, that's like 6 people, 8 people maybe. Oh God, and so you're going to win. I mean, your chances are 1 out of 8. Does anyone, it's $5 for a $65 book. Does anyone else want to do a last minute? Okay, do it. Grab it. Your chances are awesome. Run to the back table. Still, it's only like 10 people. So you have a 1 in 10 chance. That's a little better than the state lottery. Okay, we got Ann Chris videoing now. I looked at the dinner table, and who brought that long loaf of bread? Rudy, awesome. And you know what? The secret tonight was to put the meatballs and sauce on top of it. Who brought the meatballs? Awesome, thank you. And of course, I'm a little prejudiced, but I thought the ham was good. And there was casseroles. Who brought the casserole? Oh, come on, own up to it. Ami did. The food was, tonight was different. Usually we get 900 desserts. There's like 16 kinds of brownies and 42 kinds of cookies, and then there's 3 main dishes. Tonight was awesome. People cooked. It was really great. Let's give ourselves a hand for the potluck. You know, 4 times a year we put on these programs, and Gail McToon is responsible. Stand up, Gail, and let's give her a hand. But tonight was Cook's night off, and somebody new put on the program. And so after we do the raffle, I'm going to introduce her for the full thing to take over and introduce everything. But right now, let's just give Rebecca a hand here. Scotty wants to do his clapper thing. So everybody put your hands over your ears. He loves doing that. You know, who am I to deny him? You know, if next time anyone else wants to do it, we'll have a little line and people can come up and clap. We'll raffle it off. Okay. Are you ready, Ed? Okay. How many people think they're the one that's going to win the book? Wow, that's more people than have raffle tickets. Okay. That's confidence. So he's shaking the magic jar. He's bringing it up here. Okay. Did you stick the gum on the... Oh, I'm sorry, the mic's on. So what am I do? Read the number?
Read the number.
Oh, here is the number. Okay, follow closely. 3-1. How many people have 3-1 to start? 0-6. And then 0-6 again. Oh, it's the head of the Friends of the Topanga Library. No. That's not. No, wrong person. Okay, wrong person. Anyways, she won a book for $5. Now, hold on to your tickets. Why? If you get, how many tickets? Was it 8?
I don't remember.
If you get $65 worth of tickets at $5 a whack, just turn them in to Ed or me and we'll give you a book. So you can't lose with the raffle. You keep trying until you get $65 worth, and you say, okay, I didn't win a book, but I bought $65 worth of tickets. Give me a book. So hang on to them. I've got an extra one right here. Who would like it? Okay. So with no further ado, let's give Rebecca a big hand, and she'll tell you about the program.
Really, Buzz? Really? I think I need a step stool or a little help here. First of all, it's wonderful when you're sometimes out at Topanga at a friend's house having a nice dinner and you run into somebody else from Topanga. It's like you're old friends even though you just met. And that's what happened when I met Gary and his wife Annie. And we got to talking about Topanga, talking about beekeeping. We thought, wow, that'd be a great program. And we also have a lot of other beekeepers in the canyon. So without much further ado, I want to introduce Gary Varney, who moved in here in 1951 with his family. It's a long family history, if you read The Messenger, of beekeeping in the United States. And then we've also invited Daniel Von Wetter, who will speak after Gary for a short period, and with John Bibb. And then wrapping up the program will be Delmar Lathers, who needs no introduction because he was a featured speaker here several years ago. And we'll take questions and answers after each speaker, but we'll also at the very end have time for any questions that were missed. Am I missing something? Okay, anyway, and there's also a lot of paraphernalia that we hope that after the speakers have a chance to talk, that you come and peruse it. So without any further ado, Gary Varney.
Hello, Topanga.
You got it, Gary? You got to be on the mic.
Okay, yeah.
This is...
It's nice to be back in Topanga again. I drive through it on a weekly basis, but seeing all of your faces just reminds me of just how much this was and is still the home of my heart. I grew up here. As Rebecca was saying, my family came here in 1951 and 2, and we started keeping bees. Well, that's not exactly accurate. My family, if you would, I'll give a brief history, came to the United States in the early 1600s, possibly 1622. I haven't got the name of the ship that they arrived on, but from what I understand, they brought bees with them because they were beekeepers in England and Europe as well. So I'm not positive, but we may have been the first bees to arrive in the New World. Bees did not honeybees did not exist here. There were thousands of natural pollinators, but the Apis mellifera, the honeybee, arrived with the Europeans. And honeybees, just for general knowledge, go back at least 56 million years, possibly further. They only had the fossils that they found in Europe that date back into the, what would be, I guess, around the Oligocene, but that the possibility for bees extending further back is quite possible in as much as they evolved in South and Southeast Asia. So there's been a long-term relationship between bees and human beings, and it probably, at least the keeping of bees in a domesticated sense. I'm not sure bees are ever really truly domesticated. They do just fine out in the wild. It goes back at least with the Egyptians back to the time to and prior to the pyramids. They've even found honey that has been closed up with sarcophagus or mummies, and the honey is largely mummified itself, but it's still honey, even though it's completely and totally dehydrated. So, more recently, after the bees came to North America, my family moved, after the Civil War, they moved out to Nebraska and brought bees with them there. And my grandfather was, who taught beekeeping to his 4 sons and his daughter as well, which he named them all Ed, every one of them, and including my aunt. Yeah. It went, his name was Edmund. Actually, it was a carryover for some time back in England. Sir Edmund Varney named his first boy Edmund, and then his next one, Edgar. That was my dad, also known as Bud. And then there was Edward, also known as Animal Ed. And then there was Edwin. And then he had a daughter named Edna, I think. He obviously had some sense of humor, twisted though it may be. At least he didn't name one of them Ebenezer, which was also in the family tree. That would have made Animal Ed really vicious, I think. So they all became beekeepers, every one of them. They all lived a life of bees. And my dad I kept bees with him since the time I was a very young boy, like old enough to pump a smoker. Moment. This is a smoker, and it's a vital tool for a beekeeper. It keeps you from being killed. You load it with either burlap or bark or grasses or, buffalo chips, whatever you have available, and it produces, every time you pump the bellows, it produces smoke, and that was my job as a young boy, to make sure that the bees were kept calm. It gives them a different sense of priority, rather. They tend to rate fire as a greater hazard than you are as a beekeeper invading the hive. So at least that's the way I understand it. It does calm them down, it has a calming effect. It gives them something else to do other than sting you, hopefully. It depends on the nature of the bees as well. They come from being bees or I wouldn't necessarily say friendly, but calm, accepting to bees that are in the extreme, like the Africanized bees. They're not accepting at all. They want to kill you and will do it if they can. So beekeeping in Topanga. We started out in Topanga with, we already had bees, but the house I grew up in, oddly enough, is still there. It has been completely surrounded by tract homes, largely. It's right on the corner of Mulholland and Old Topanga Canyon. It's been preserved by the Mountains Restoration Trust. And it's still got the two huge palm trees out front, and it looks identical to when we walked away from it or moved. And it still has the same wallpaper on it that my mother hung in my bedroom, and the same kitchen chairs, the same table. It's spooky. But, it's kind of nice to see something preserved in an era where not much is. So that's where we kept bees from there. There was a place down the canyon, maybe close to a mile, and it was a canyon that's now filled with houses, and it had a grape vineyard there and an old dairy barn, and that was used as our base of operations then. And we kept bees there, extracted honey there, built equipment there, painted things, did mechanical work, and life really kind of revolved around that. I spent an enormous amount of time there extracting honey in the summer times when it was about 120 degrees or more inside the building. But it was, I don't know, I look back at it and it was hot, hard, heavy work with a lot of stings because it was so hot in there, you just wore a minimal amount of clothing, just to cover the bare essentials, and boots filled full of water, and you got this mist of honey, so everybody glistened like they were little sequins on them, because the honey flew out of the extractors and just landed all over you, so you were just this sticky ball. And then the bees would come and land on you and get stuck and get angry and sting you. So my father would be so arrested these days for sure. It would have been abuse, I think, probably. I'm certain of it. But there were a lot of good times. It was, as in agriculture, the children do what they have to do, and to make for the survival of the family, and that's the way it was. And I never questioned it. I just suckered a lot of my friends in there with me, who resent me to this day. Yeah, truly. I had one friend said, I would rather do 2 tours in Vietnam and boot camp again for a year before I come back here for 3 months with you in South Dakota. I got it, we kept bees. It had, up until, oh golly, I kept bees up on Henry Ridge. We had locations in other places along Mulholland. Not that many in the canyon because, well, there were too many houses there to have too many, first minimum yard of bees would consist of about 40 colonies. And it just would be a problem for people with their horses and their animals and the bees wanting to collect water when the summer is getting really hot. So we didn't keep bees that much in Topanga Canyon around the fringe, and all through the Santa Monica Mountains had bee yards all up and down Topanga Canyon. And it was an amazingly wonderful place for honey production, for a life at that time when you could work your tail off and get the bees ready and super them up, and if you had enough rain, you could count on making a living. And oftentimes I would super the bees off, and supering up means giving them room with the frames and the boxes empty on top for them to make all the honey that you would anticipate them being able to make. Then I would leave and go off on an archaeological dive someplace in the world and come back and extract the honey, and everything was fine. But that's not beekeeping today. You've all heard the stories about colony collapse disorder, I assume. And it's real, but it's still unknown as to what really causes it. It's probably more of a syndrome than it is a disease based on insecticides, particularly the neonicotinoids that have been banned, or at least a partial ban has been placed on them in Europe, and it seems to reduce the amount of colony collapse disorder they experience. It's really odd because there's no dead bees in front of your hive. There's just no bees at all in your hive or outside your hive. And I've not really experienced that, and I asked myself why. And I think because commercial beekeeping requires a kind of beekeeping. Let me backtrack a little bit. Commercial beekeeping, my family were commercial beekeepers, okay? But we only ran a couple thousand colonies of bees. Now, that seems like a lot to the average person. But I had a kid who was 18, followed me home, and he was interested in bees, and I thought, oh, good, a servant. I can put this guy into slavery. And he worked for me for a while, and I taught him as much as I knew about beekeeping, and he took off, and he really ran with the ball. He runs 26,000 colonies of bees. And I don't know how he does it, frankly. It's just like it's beyond me. I wouldn't want his lifestyle. But he has a substantial income, as you might imagine, when just pollination prices on the almonds are close to $200 a colony, and sometimes more. At times 26,000. I don't know how much money that is, but it's a lot. And then he has, crops all over North America that he goes to and pollinates, some blackberries and blueberries and raspberries and, oranges, and he makes sweet clover honey in North Dakota and the almond pollination out here. That requires a kind of beekeeping that is not necessarily sympathetic to the bees and to the bees' needs. I would have a hard time doing it. It's the bees, when you grow up with them and they become a part of your life, as they were my father's. He was oftentimes more like a bee than a human being in many ways. when I was doing some therapy, I went, oh, I got it. I got it. I know why I feel like a feral child. I was raised by an insect. Well, he was. He was the. I always say my father was a queen. I'm not saying he was a lesbian, but he was. He definitely had I saw him on a big room. A room is this size here. It was full of 55-gallon drums of honey, and he's standing on top of it, just going like. And I went, oh my God, there he is. And I looked at it, and the drums of honey looked like honeycomb, and there he was in the middle of it. And I was going, he's an insect. He couldn't have been more pleased. He was a great guy. I miss him a lot. We worked bees up until the point where he basically died in the bee yard with me. And it was actually a blessing, because he was in no shape for becoming an old, doddering man with a walker. So it was hard to have happen, but heck, you got to go sometimes. Going in and doing it in the bee yard is. I think probably a lot of beekeepers die in the bee yard. I think they would prefer that. So, beekeeping today is a different thing than it was in the early years in Topanga Canyon. It's a completely different kind of business. It has a completely different set of priorities. It's changed dramatically. There are numerous pests that attack the bees. You've probably heard about the varroa mite. That's my roughest competitor. And then there's the tracheal mite that infests them, and there's other diseases with names so long I can't even remember how to pronounce them. Viruses that come with the mite that cause curly wing, and you see the bees walking around in front of the hive. They have no wings, so they're not very effective pollinators that way. It's become a business where there's no time out, unless you're my brother, who spends half the year in Thailand and figures out how to make somebody else do the work. He's genius at that. And he still loves keeping bees, and he's 72, and I suspect probably my brother will die in a bee yard as well. He doesn't want to, but he's kind of painted himself in a corner there. So, back to the colony collapse disorder. Nobody's come up with a definitive answer. Not yet. They're still working on it. And I hope they do come up with an answer for it, because it's a serious problem. And it affects all of us. It affects people who don't know anything about it, because if it's left unresolved, it probably isn't something that's going to bother the backyard beekeeper that much, because I think it has a lot to do with myself, my own private feelings about it, and I probably get slapped down by more educated people on the topic, although as it goes along, I find myself being vindicated that it's a combination of effects, and some of it I think has to do with the kind of beekeeping that my friend Joe does. There's 26,000 colonies of bees. They're fed they're fed in the fall high fructose corn syrup and soy protein in order to build the bees up to go on and qualify for the frame count that has to be inside the hive. The inspector comes along, and if you don't have enough bees in your box, you don't get paid. So there's a real push to artificially push those bees into an artificial pollen and nectar source that doesn't really exist in the natural world. And it's usually in the fall when the bees experience colony collapse disorder. Why it may be something in the combination of that and the neonicotinoids that are used on those crops that go systemic that is causing part of the problem. That's just my surmise and my humble opinion. I don't do that. I will not feed them soy protein. I will not feed them high fructose corn syrup. If I need to feed them, concocted a protein source using brewer's yeast and honey and natural pollen that I would eat myself. I can eat myself, have eaten myself with no ill effect. And the other source would be just straight, cane sugar dissolved in water until it becomes a syrup, and the bees will feed on that if need be during any time of the year. If the nectar source, the last several years we haven't had any rain, there's been no nectar flow out of the mountains, nothing to speak of. Certainly not any surplus. I haven't extracted honey in a number of years because of the drought. So it becomes necessary at times to artificially feed the bees. But feeding them poison is not going to, if you just fed me soy protein and high fructose corn syrup, I wouldn't be speaking here tonight. I'm sure of it. So, I don't know. Any questions? Okay. Check.
Hi, Gary. I'm John. Hey, John. Oh, thanks. Hi, Gary. I'm John York.
Hey, John. Nice to see you again.
It's always a pleasure. We ought to do this every 50 years.
How is my cousin?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about, because I'm friends with your first cousin, whose father is Edwin, and she would always...
Yes, Edmund, yes.
Yeah. She would always tell me stories about spending summers in South Dakota and then driving to Nacogdoches, Texas.
Oh,
with
yes.
all the bees. Now, why the hell do you have to do that with bees?
Oh, just to torture the kids, I think.
Did it work?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. So many times I would look at freight trains and go, I'm going to get on it. I got to get out of here. It was Nacogdoches, Texas, and during those years was not necessarily the friendliest place to be if you were a hippie. And Center, Texas was even worse. It was the lynching capital of the South. It was scary to be down there as a kid in high school with long hair or just out of high school. The reason we went down there at the risk of my life was that it provided a temperate climate for the bees to winter over in. And it also provided an early spring for the bees to build up in, and for you to make your divides or new colonies and requeen your bees and do all of the spring work that couldn't be done because it's still snow covered in the Dakotas. So you're down there in Texas, you do all of the work that needs to be done, all your early spring work, and you get the bees ready. And there were things that would bloom naturally in Texas, the locust trees primarily, and some ground cover. It was a clover, and the bees would do quite well there. And then you'd haul them in semi-trucks back north, and try to get them to South Dakota by mid-June, and then they would go crazy making honey on the sweet clover resources that were there because of the government's program of soil banking. And they put millions of acres into sweet clover, which put nitrogen back in the soil. And that lasted for a number of years until the end of the soil bank program. And then it changed the whole nature of beekeeping in the Dakotas. A lot of it the sweet clover, of course, went feral, and in a lot of areas it still is prolific. There was a problem, though, with Russian thistle getting into it, and in the counties that we controlled for bees, I don't know, it was some plot of the Dutch Reformed Church to kill all the sweet clover, I think, because they would spray it in the springtime. instead of in the fall when they were supposed to. So they never really got rid of the Russian thistle, but they did an excellent job of getting rid of the sweet clover. So even there, everything changes. Nothing stays the same. So that's why we went, John, to the Dakotas, other than the sheer thrill of being in the South. And it was thrilling sometimes. Yes.
My question is, at what point did you, so you guys were doing both honey and comb?
Can we start over? Yeah, I'm supposed to repeat the questions. I forgot, sorry.
I'll repeat the question. My question of you is, I know that you were doing both honey, you were using your hives to gather honey, but you were also doing pollination.
Correct.
And then did you always harvest honey and pollinate, or did you split it up at a certain point?
When we were in the Dakotas, and like I think maybe I already stated, we left for the Dakotas back in like 1959 and hauled the bees from California to South Dakota, and from there back to California, from California back to South Dakota, and used it a bit like we springboarded to Texas. Texas has a great deal of advantage because it's flat the entire way, as opposed to hauling bees over the Rockies. And I have some hairball stories about that, but we won't go into it. There's no time for it. Losing your brakes with a truckload of bees, not fun. Yeah. Jump, Gary. No, Dad. I think I'll stick it out with you. So there wasn't really any pollination there that we got paid on. There was a potential for pollinating alfalfa for the seed, but actually that never happened. It was nice having the alfalfa go all the way through the seed cycle because then you got a maximum amount of bloom, and alfalfa produces a very nice honey, and there was a lot of alfalfa and sweet clover. Typically, the farmers will mow the sweet clover just as it's coming to bloom because they want to capture that protein that's left in the flower pod before it blooms out and loses it. So, the pollination contracts, really the only ones that were really available were here in California, and even in the early days before I got burned out in the '78 fire. The prospect of driving my bees all the way to Bakersfield for $15 a colony just seemed ridiculous when I could make twice that much in honey here off the eucalyptus. So it wasn't until really in the last few decades, the last 30 years, 40 years or so, that pollination prices on the almonds have hit something that now every beekeeper in North America that's commercial, and I mean every one of them, come out to California for the pollination of the almonds. It's primary. If you don't make it, you don't make it. You'll probably go bust. You need that extra income in order to make things pay. So when I go on pollination, I meet beekeepers from West Virginia and the Carolinas and South Florida and Maine and Wisconsin and you name it. Every beekeeper vacates. And it's really quite interesting to watch if you're coming up the Grapevine in particular, or down the 99. It's just in the nighttime is when you haul bees primarily, at least locally. It is truck after truck after truck after truck. There's millions of colonies of bees that are hauled into the state of California for a 6-week period.
Let's take one more question and then we'll move to the next speaker.
Okay.
So how does the queen get appointed? I mean, is it a line of royalty, or how does she get her position?
They have a parliament. And just like the British farm, there's a lot of bickering that goes on. No, it's a good question. How is the queen selected? Well, she is, how she works that out. It's not so much of her being selected. She is relentlessly murderous to any competition, just like the British Empire. The typical cycle of a colony of bees, how they procreate is by swarming. That's their baby. Actually, the swarm isn't really the baby. The mother queen leaves with a population that is sufficient for, and with stores that they ingest to take with them. And when she's ready to swarm, she's already laid eggs in queen cells that are maturing and are about ready to hatch. And she has to dry up, stop laying eggs for at least 3 days for her abdomen to shrink enough so that she can become aeronautical again. And takes off with a bunch of the bees and flies off, and usually hangs at a very short distance from the hive in a tree or overhang or something, bush, until the scouts can go out. How an insect that doesn't have a brain figures all this stuff out is beyond me. I'm constantly amazed by bees and their behavior and the complexity of it and the adaptability of it with a ganglion and, that you could put on a pinhead, or smaller, way smaller. At any rate, she will go off and establish wherever the scouts determine is a good new home for them, either in a tree or a hollow tree, or they overhang of some kind, the eaves of a roof, get into a wall. We've all known about that happening. They're really good at it. And then what happens inside the hive is these other queens begin to hatch. Well, the first one that hatches out runs around, chews down the cells, and stings her competitor before they get a chance to hatch. So she kills off the would-be, competition. And if she misses one, they have it out, and the winner is the queen. They actually, inside the hive, they go beep, 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 and then they find one another, and they send out this little Morse code, and then they scrap it out. And, whoever doesn't get stung, or the one that gets stung is the loser. And that's how they find out who's going to be the next queen. The old queen is the one that leaves, yes. Okay.
Thank you, Gary. Gary will be back. Don't go far. And if Daniel Von Wetter and John Bibb, who work together in tending hives, I think in Old Canyon. All right. And Daniel needs no introduction.
Hi, how you guys doing tonight?
Hi, I'm John Bibb, Daniel's friend. We keep bees together.
Basically, he showed up when I was like 7, asked my folks if he could keep some hives on the hillside on our property, and I started suiting up with them a couple times a year and learning about bees. And here we are 30 years later, and I kind of fell out of it a little while when I was a teenager, but came back from college and had a degree in environmental studies and biology under my belt, and was all fired up to get back into the bees. And I actually started wrangling bees on a totally separate angle, but it was really interesting to learn about bees from that side of, just how they move into people's houses and all the various situations that go along with that. It was pretty interesting. But it brought me back around to beekeeping in Topanga, and ultimately I stopped that because as much as I was all about saving the bees, trying to do a live relocation of a beehive when you're 30, 40 feet up on a ladder in a bee suit in the middle of summer, it's like a walking sauna, and it's not safe, and all the bees that infest people's houses are African. All the wild bees are pretty much Africanized, and so invariably they're going to be really mean and not cooperative. But so what I've found through all of that is that I much more enjoy beekeeping and maintaining hives and, being instrumental in bringing their aggressiveness back down to a copacetic level and, trying to facilitate their health in every way possible and their, and hence the health of the local ecosystem. John, you got some?
Well, I got interested in bees when I was a Boy Scout. The scoutmaster was a beekeeper, and I decided I wanted to keep bees, and so I was trying to keep bees, and I had one hive of bees, and I never made any honey. And I just could not seem to succeed, and so I got out of beekeeping, went to college and all that kind of stuff, and one day I was scheduled to go scuba diving, and the boat canceled. And so I called all around to see if I could get on some other boat to go scuba diving. Could not. So I was threatening suicide at home, and my wife said, well, why don't you get back into beekeeping? She, of course, has regretted that. If you're a guy and you do a hobby, well, you overdo it, right? So I looked in the phone book, the Santa Monica phone book, and there was a guy who listed himself as a beekeeper. So I called him up, and he said, okay, meet me on such and such a corner, bring $200 in cash, and I'll sell you 4 beehives. That's how all business is done in Santa Monica, isn't it? And so I got these 4 beehives and kept them at my house in the Palisades. Somebody finally complained about my bees, and I had to move them. And I was able to move them out to Topanga, and that's how I got hooked up with Daniel here and his family. I was making some honey at home. I figured I'd make less in Topanga, so I divided my hives, and instead of having 3 or 4 hives, I had about 8 hives, and those hives made twice as much honey as my bees did in the Palisades when I had them there. So I'd make 1,000 pounds of honey a year or more. I just don't know how much, and for a hobby beekeeper, that's a lot of honey. And I'd haul honey into work. I'd just give it away, and I'd give it away, and I'd haul it into work and give it away until I was embarrassed. And I'd finally be out of it, and then people would run up to me, John, I didn't get any honey. How did you miss? So I keep bees for a number of crazy reasons. For one thing, it helps you relate to nature, the seasons, and all of that kind of stuff. And there's the biology of the bees, which is fascinating. As a beekeeper, you're a partner with the bees. You don't have to kill the bees. You don't have to sacrifice the bees. You and the bees work together. I try and take care of the bees. I try and keep them alive, which has become harder and harder in recent years, but still possible. I enjoy the people that I meet beekeeping. I enjoy giving honey away. It's been a very enjoyable thing throughout most of my life.
I'd say we have about probably 16 hives right now. We oscillate between 15 and 20. They're spread out all around Topanga. So, each hive, the bees will pollinate up to like a 3-mile radius around the hive. So, if you think about it, we're really covering a good chunk of Topanga. There's a lot of wild hives out there. That's one thing I really became aware of through the bee wranglings. They are all over the place, which is great. But another largely overlooked aspect is, our friend, his family possibly brought bees to America, but native beekeeping gets completely overlooked pretty much. And it's as simple as just setting up a little native bee house and the effect that that has is really interesting, because one of the interesting things about bees is they operate in a bee line, which we're all familiar with, but it's a straight line to the flowers that they're pollinating and back to the hive. Whereas native bees have a completely different pattern of flight, and they do zigzags and diagonals between all the different flowers. So the result is that there's a whole different set of flowers that end up getting pollinated by the native bees versus the European bees, which, so we should all be focusing on all the bees, not just the European bees, even though we don't get honey from the other ones.
How are they doing, the native bees, versus the European?
I think a lot better than the European bees. I mean, they don't get fed a steady diet of pesticides and, agricultural crops that are just, loaded with God knows what.
I have a question about hive versus colony. Are they
Synonymous.
they're synonymous?
Yes.
Hive versus colony. I wanted to know if they're synonymous or if they're, he said they are.
Did you say that wild bees are Africanized?
It's all the wild hives, like basically, as I understand it, the African bee hybridizes with the local bee, and so every generation, they become more and more Africanized. And so what we do is go in and, every year or so we'll identify the aggressive hives, and we'll go in and remove the aggressive queen, and we'll plant a bred European queen that we know is docile. And she will then, her progeny will start to take over the hive. And it's really interesting because you can see like the different colored bees, and like the Africans tend to be darker and a little bit smaller, whereas the engineered bees are bigger, and they try and breed a blondish color into them to make them more identifiable. So you can see the actual takeover of the nice bees, like taking over and pushing the aggressive bees out of the hive, which is a pretty interesting process.
Thank you.
There's a question in the back.
I was going to ask, what's the feasibility of sort of being a backyard beekeeper? Is it how complex if you wanted to get a couple?
How copacetic are your neighbors?
Good question. That's a big part of it.
So backyard beekeeping is pretty feasible. It depends a little bit on your neighbors. You do well to keep 1 or 2 hives only. You don't want to start getting 40 hives in your backyard. That is surely not going to work. 1 or 2 hives, and if your neighbors are cool, you're set. I have 2 or 3 hives sitting at my house, and my neighbors don't give me any trouble. I don't advertise my hives, but I don't have any trouble doing that. I had to move my hives once because somebody complained, but I just waited a few years and moved them back in, and I'm not in jail yet.
So I live on Old Canyon Road between Bonnell and Red Rock Canyon Road. And when I first moved there in '74, I used to have a lot of honeybees. Now I see only bumblebees. So does that show the diminished honeybee population?
I would say that more likely you probably had a good sized colony in your vicinity, and maybe it is no longer such. But there's a constant turnover of bees and colonies, and but on the whole, it's pretty steady in Topanga as far as I can tell. But yeah, I really couldn't give you a concrete answer on that.
A few more questions and go to Delmar, and then we'll bring it back to questions for everybody.
What area of the canyon are you getting the most yield for? You say you have hives around the canyon. Are you noticing like one certain area is like really more productive?
Well, I'll answer that. We're in a drought. and that affects everything here. And so I've had my best hive maybe made 200 pounds of honey in 1 year when it rained. But we've had so little rain lately that none of my bees make honey anywhere in the canyon, and I feed them all sugar water. So that's what's going on now. But the canyon's a great place to keep bees if you just get average rain.
Let's take 2 more questions.
Hi. I have a question. In the presence of the more aggressive, they're aggressive to me, those yellow jackets that are all over and trying to eat off your plate, do they have an effect on the honeybees in the area?
They will harass the bees, but they don't have any real noticeable effect. As far as robbing extreme amounts of honey, we find them occasionally inside the hives, but I can't really tell that they're doing anything. Best thing you can do about the yellow jackets, because through wrangling bees, I've had significant experience with yellow jackets and various other winged pests. But number one, springtime, just keep an eye out for that queen. She's out in the spring and she's flying around, and she's like a big 1-inch long yellow jacket. She's really hard to miss. And if you see her, just drop whatever you're doing and chase her down, and take your shoe off and kill her. Do whatever. Take her down. Whatever you have to do. You're doing the whole neighborhood a service. And that's the easiest way, because it's much easier than trying to tackle one of those nests. I don't advise it. John had a question.
When you talk about Africanized local bees, you're not saying that we have the African bee that hunts people down, or is it just that it's a term that we're using to describe a more aggressive bee?
Well, so in 1958, there was a guy named Kerr who was a university professor, and he imported bees from Africa into Brazil, and he was going to study them. And he had a little screen over the hives to keep the queen bees from getting out. And that would prevent the spread of those bees around. One of his helpers recognized that the screen over the hive was a poor beekeeping practice, and helped out the boss by removing those screens. And so the African bees, which are from South Africa, did get away, and they were very successful in South America. They replaced almost all of the Italian or European bees in South America. They moved through Mexico, and they moved into the southern United States. We're at about the northern border here in California, but the wild bees are indeed African bees. Those bees have been very successful. They have displaced the European bees, and the amount of these few colonies got away in South America and just replaced all the bees everywhere. So there are some places in South America that are high altitude that still have Italian bees, but the wild bees around here are about 90% African. They're African in Arizona, New Mexico, and partway through Texas. And for some reason, there's a line partway through Texas, and they don't go east of there. To my knowledge, they're not in Florida and those states, but they're certainly in our state. But there is a line just a little north of here, and the wild bees up there are Italians. So we have African bees. Now, African bees aren't aggressive. They don't want to sting you. They're just very defensive. So if they perceive that you're a threat to their colony or disturbing their colony, it's not good. But otherwise, they have no interest in you at all. and they just they're interested in flowers.
Yeah, there's no difference between their foraging behavior and that of a European bee.
But I would not knock over an African beehive to see what happens.
One way to think about it is that when the queen leaves the hive and she goes on a mating flight early in her lifespan, and she goes to a prearranged spot, and there's all these drones from a bunch of different hives that are there waiting for her. And she mates with all these drones at the same time. And so some of them are African. And so, her progeny with those bees become partially African. But then if one of those queens, or one of those becomes a queen, then it's like exponential how much African gets into the next hive that's produced. And so it kind of builds on itself like that, and they sort of push out the European docileness. And so that's kind of the way I've found to look at it and sort of understand how it spreads through the hives and how that whole mechanism works.
I guess we're done.
Good.
Thank you. So hang around, because there'll be questions at the very end. Our last speaker is Delmar Lathers, who is also a beekeeper, oddly enough. And so Delmar, take it away.
Hi, I'm Delmar, and beekeeping here in Topanga, I basically, when I was a kid, and I'd hang out with Tui and his little brother Alu, and we were up on Grandview, and we were across the street from this Schifrin's house, and one or two doors down was this old man that we used to tease because he'd get really mad at us. But his name was Whitmore, and he was a beekeeper here in Topanga, and sometimes he had good days and he'd show us what he was doing, and that kind of got our interest. And Alu, Tui's little brother, is also a beekeeper. And then a little later in my teens, Jim Sullivan would work bees, and he had taken me under his wing to learn ceramics, and I showed some interest, and he had me smoking the smoker for him at age 16. And then I pulled my own hive out of somebody's wall. Connie Wright's, one of her houses had a beehive in the wall, and I pulled it out and put it in boxes, and I've had those hives ever since. So since I was 17, sometimes I'd travel. I'd go to Europe and bicycle across Australia and do all these different things and be gone for years. And I would just stick my bees in a field that I didn't think would bother anybody, and I'd come back and there they'd be, full of honey. And some beekeepers, they go into their hives a lot, and other beekeepers just feel that you should leave them, give them what they need and leave them alone. And I was kind of the give them what they need, leave them alone type of beekeeper. I never bought any hives. I never bought any queens, so they were all feral European bees. I'd say most of my hives are partly Africanized now. They're pretty hot. The difference would be if I go up and take a super off a hive of a gentle hive, which I used to have, I might get a few stings in the suit by the time I got back to the car, and 4 or 5 really angry guard bees zooming around my around the veil. And now my hottest hive that's up on Saddle Peak, or Stunt Road, off of Stunt Road, that hive, to do the same thing that would get me 4 guards hovering around my head after I came out from where the hive was. Now it would be 120 bees trying to kill me, basically, really, really, right on the, really, like it's, and you're looking at them, they're right there, and you're looking, going, okay, I left a hive. And then you look down and you'd see maybe 200 or 300 stingers stuck in your suit. Whereas, before it would have been 4 or 5 stingers stuck in your suit. So, yeah, they don't come looking for trouble, but if you touch that hive, the response is a lot bigger. It's a lot bigger response. But they still make honey, or at least they still are in mine, and it's still good honey. And so, it probably would be good to trade those queens out for some gentler ones. I think I might do that this year. I haven't touched my hives in like 3 years because I just didn't want to bother them through this drought. And the difference for me, I know a lot about the plants in the Santa Monica Mountains, and for me, you know, this much rain means that this hillside isn't going to have 3 stems of Clarkia with 1 blossom each. It's going to have 300 or 400 stems of Clarkia that have 50 blossoms on each stem. And that's the difference in nectar that you're going to get when you get rain on a little hillside, just a little bank. And so that equates to honey. Now, my facts might not be totally accurate. They're secondhand, but the way I understand it, a bee produces only about 2 drops of honey more than it uses in its lifetime. So that jar of honey on the table represents a lot of life's work of bees, but there are a lot of bees in the colony. The worker bees are all female, and they, you know, a healthy hive is anywhere from 2,000 to 8,000 bees. These are averages. I'm sure there are other parameters for that, but the queen is chosen. It can be any worker egg that's placed in a large cell. The workers will create comb, and some of the comb will be bigger, and the queen will come along and lay an egg in that bigger one, and then they'll feed that one royal jelly, and it will become more mature than the worker bees and will become a queen if there's more than one of those, because if the queen is starting to get infertile, there's a signal in the hive to make these cells that get the same egg, the same worker egg, and then they give them that royal jelly, and they become a more mature worker and a fertile queen. As they mature, they peep. Still in the cell, they go peep, peep, peep to be fed. And so the first queen out of the cell runs around the comb and listens for that peeping, and will sting right down into the little chamber and kill it before it's born out of its little chrysalis. And so there's quite the little hierarchy that happens between the queens. Sometimes there'll be 8 queen cells in a hive, and just one is going to try to get those other ones before they come out. It always amazes me at this time of year, the bees are building up. They want numbers so that when the honey flow happens in March or April, they've really got the numbers they need to store that honey and put that honey away, and pollen. And so right now, the queen could be laying as much as 200 eggs per day, you know, each day, 200 eggs per day. And the workers are building that comb and getting those cells ready and feeding those bees as they mature to build up to that 8,000 bee, you know, army that they need to really put it away when the nectar happens, when that nectar flow happens, that honey flow. During the honey flow, an adult bee may work itself to death in 2 weeks. It may only be an adult for about 2 weeks. It works so hard that it beats its wings right off. In the winter months when it's colder, that same worker bee could live 4.5 months. So there's the queen can live, 8 years? 6 to 8?
Live that long. She generally slows down in production. Bees generally want to get rid of her before that period of time.
Right. Now,
we've had marked queens that were definitely 5 years old.
Wow. So the queen has definitely got the advantage in longevity and strength. It's quite neat to watch the queen run from you when you pull the comb up and suddenly she's in the light. You'll see her trying to get to the other side of the comb to hide from you, and you keep flipping the thing over and looking for her. And she's got longer legs, and she's climbing over the other bees, and she's moving. And as she's moving, the other bees keep pointing at her and kind of giving her away. But she's quick and strong. The young ones, they're kind of cool looking. Anyway, most of my dealing with bees has been pulling them out of walls and roofs and trying to put them into boxes and trying to keep them alive through these different little blights that we had, the tracheal mites and the different diseases that they've had. But I guess at the high point, I probably had 18 hives. Some of those hives produced 120 plus pounds per season. So sometimes I had more than 1,000 pounds of honey in the summer, and other years, nothing. The last 3 years, I haven't gotten any honey from the bees. I try not to put any kind of medicines or medications or strips to kill the mites, or, I try to just let the bees work out who's going to survive and who's not, and then I repopulate from the ones that make it. So it's kind of Darwin's little experiment that I've been doing with my bees, but they're still there, and they're still going, and I enjoy working them. It's always a good day when it's spring and there's rain and the bees are happy. It's always, there's a good vibe around that, the smell, the scent of the hive. It's a good experience. Any questions?
If the bee loses its stinger, does it die?
Yes, yeah. The stinger apparatus, I don't know if the queen does, but the workers do.
Repeat the question,
Does a bee die when it loses its stinger? So basically, it's kind of cool. The stinger has 5 or 6 parts, but 2 of the parts are these barbs that are muscularly linked so that they go like this. Even after they've torn off, they go like this. That's why the sting feels like it's hurting more and more and more. So it rips off and it goes like that. And when it can't go into the skin any farther, it squeezes the poison sac at the end and squeezes in the venom. That's why if you try to pull the stinger out, you're squeezing the poison sac. You're dumping all the poison in. So you're supposed to break it off with a fingernail or a credit card or something. You want to break that stinger off to keep that action from pushing the rest of the venom in. A guard bee on the skirt can have 12 times the venom in its sting that a field bee can have. So the ones that are on the skirt and they're going like this and they look like little bodybuilders, and when you get near the hive, they look at you, they follow you like that. And then when they leave the skirt, they go right for your eyebrows. Those are the ones that have about 12 times the venom, and if they whack you in the eyebrow, you are going to know it for a few days. So when this little package tears off and the little muscles go like this and it gets to the end of the thing and it squeezes the venom, all around where it tore off are these little sacs full of pheromones. And basically the pheromones are released when the stinger tears off the rear end of the bee, and that marks you. You are now a marked man with pheromones, and all the other bees know that you're the target. And then it's on, like one. And that's when you see the guy running like this through the field. That's when he's leaving a trail of pheromones that the other bees are following like that. Another thing is never try to put a nail into the hive with a hammer, when they're in there. They don't like pounding and hammering. And I learned that one the hard way. Like, I had this hive and it was so full of hives above it, it was splitting like this. And I thought, God, if I could just get a nail in right here. And I finished working the bees, and then right before I was going to go back to the car, I thought, man, I'm just going to whack one in there. And I go tap, tap, wham, 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 and I started running away, and I looked back, and this arc came out of the hive like this. This big black arrow. It was like a cartoon coming down at me. And as I ran, they were pelting me like hailstones. And when I got back to the car, I had 18 stings through 3 layers of clothes on the trunk of my body. I mean, I could not believe that they were able to sting through 3 layers of material. So yeah, they really, when it's on, they really go for it. So yeah.
I'm curious about the royal jelly. What's it consist of? And I'm curious about the royal jelly that gets fed to the queen. What does it consist of, and who determines what, and how does it made, and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I don't know. I know that the bees make different products. They make propolis for sterilizing the inside of the hive and coating the hive, and for closing up gaps where air and is where they don't want there to be a draft, to keep bugs out, to keep other pests out. I'd say the biggest problems I've had in Topanga were the ants, the little black ants that go after the bees, and you have to do different things to keep the hives off the ground so that the ants won't come after them. The second biggest predator would be the yellow jackets, which will dice up a bee into pieces and carry them off very aggressively. When the yellow jackets seem to be strongest at the end of summer, in August, whereas the bees are kind of strongest in March, April. You'll notice a picnic in March doesn't have the yellow jackets that it will have in August. In August, man, they're flying into your soda can as you're taking a hit, like they just get very, very aggressive in the later part of the year. But I have noticed for a long time I hated yellow jackets, and I was like, what purpose is there for yellow jackets? And one year I was laying under this oak tree while all the little blossoms, the little oak tassels were all in pollen, and I noticed that the entire tree was covered with yellow jackets, and I realized that our Quercus agrifolia, our live oaks, are pollinated by the yellow jackets. And I was like, aha, I get it now. But they're also called a meat bee, which they clean up carcasses and meat, and they have a mouth that's like looks like those Norelco razors that had the little circular heads that that they had 3 little heads and you'd go like that to shave with. They have a mouth part that looks like that. It's made out of these scales, and when they turn their mouth, these little scales dig in and take a section of flesh out in one scoop. I don't know if you've ever been bitten by a yellow jacket. They sting and they bite. But the yellow jacket can sting without losing his stinger. He can sting multiple times. But he can also take a piece of your flesh. And when they do, if you look at it real close or use a magnifying glass, it's a little scoop. Like somebody just took a little ice cream scooper and just scooped the flesh right out. They've got this quite amazing mouth part.
What's your hunch about, why do you think, what's behind the collapse?
Monsanto is behind the collapse. That's my guess, and I'm sticking to it.
Mine too. Yeah, I think it's what's behind the monarchs having such a hard time.
Yeah, I think while Bush Jr. was in office, he made the head of the EPA the second highest ranking corporate executive of the Monsanto company. So it was the fox watching the hen house, and we're still feeling the repercussions of it. So.
Are there questions for our other speakers as well? If there are, when you just ask, give a name who you want to answer.
Can somebody show us some of the equipment?
Certainly. Well, to answer a question the royal jelly you asked about is primarily produced by the young attendant bees, and it's fed most specifically to the queen throughout her entire life. That's why she's capable of living many multiples longer than the worker bee does. She's able to regrow wasted body cells, whereas a worker bee, when it's finished, and they can't repair wasted body cells, but the queen can. And she develops much more rapidly, even though she comes from the same egg as the worker comes from. You can graft a worker egg into any cell that's a queen cell and put it into a hive without, essentially it's a little more involved in this, but in any hive that's queenless, and they will raise a queen from that cell by feeding her royal jelly. And she matures and hatches out in 17 days, whereas a worker bee takes 21 days and a drone takes 28. And there's a whole lot of weirdness that goes along with bee genetics as well. But about the royal jelly, it's an extremely rich food source, high in pantothenic acids, all kinds of B vitamins, and yeah, true. And it's a very powerful food source if you can get it in its pure state for human beings as well.
Do all the workers produce it?
No, they all get it when they're going from an egg into a larval stage. They're the bees are fed minuscule amounts of it compared to what the queen gets. She gets a thimble full of it, and they get like, I don't know how much, less than a rice grain. And they develop in that, and then they pupate and turn into a worker bee. So they're, in a sense, like a stunted queen, or a queen is a fully developed female, whereas the workers are underdeveloped, even though it takes longer for them to actually mature. So in the world of insects, royal jelly is really kind of a magical substance. It's what makes a hive actually function in many ways. Without it, there wouldn't be any queen bees. So that answers that as best I can. Thank you.
Chris is going to give you the mic if you want to
If
use
you want to
that
talk
show.
about this, some of the tools of the trade
Oh,
now.
yes. How am I doing here? There we go. There isn't a whole lot of tools there's a lot of tools that go along with beekeeping commercially if you're going to have extraction plants and carpentry shops and making your own equipment and all of that. But just the basics that a hobbyist would need for maintaining a beehive in your backyard is you need a veil and a hat that goes over your head, and I could demonstrate it to you, but I think you've got the idea. The strings, tie it down around your collar, around here, wrap it around your waist. And there's now new veils that are like this that zip onto your bee suit, which can look. Well, there's one that belongs to John. Oops. It zips up. It's pretty tight. It's got a good material. The bees don't generally sting through it. It's got elastic, and you can wear that jacket right over and just zip it around and wear your regular old Levi's. More traditionally, the bee suits are a complete set of overalls that you wear with gloves, gauntlets, and you tie your pant legs down around your boots, and you try to seal yourself up as best as you can, unless you're 5 years old, like I was. And then you just wear lots and lots and lots of tape. As I pointed out, the smoker is a critical item, but even with the Africanized bees, they don't much care how much smoke you put on them. Bee brush, good for brushing the bees off the comb when you need to remove it or add bees to another colony. This is what is known as a hive tool. Very basic implement, just is kind of like a paint scraper, only, well, actually you can't buy these. My brother and I make them. And I don't know how the beekeepers work with the tiny little tools that they normally have, because it's even difficult with these at times. We make these out of Vaughan pry bars and just cut them down and retorch them and rework them all together. And that's for getting in, pulling the comb out, scraping the wax off, prying the comb out, pulling nails out so you can bang them back in again and run for your life. That's the basics. It doesn't require a lot of expense to actually equip yourself so that you can, work bees in your backyard. I highly recommend it. It's a great thing to do. It gets you so in touch with nature. You really become keenly aware of the nuances that you normally wouldn't be aware of, such as if you're out hiking in the springtime and you hear this in the air, and you go, well, that's a nice sound, and all of a sudden you hear it go, that means a honey flow has just started. And the plants are now producing nectar, and the bees go, oh, let's get it, and they just shift gears, and off they go. And you can hear it in the flight of the wings, actually. There's a higher pitched sound. And if you're a beekeeper, that's yes! You've got a honey flow going on. I have a question for John here. Okay. your scoutmaster taught you about bees?
Yes.
Where did he come from?
His last name was Stokes. He did a little commercial beekeeping. He was out in Whittier. There used to be a merit badge in scouting, a beekeeping merit badge. And I never got the merit badge, but I qualified a scout or two to get it.
Well, that's really cool. I didn't know the Boy Scouts actually had merit badges for beekeeping. My dad didn't tell me about that part. I never got a merit badge. I got a lot of bees, though. Okay, yes? Well, the question is, what do you use to extract the honey? First, you have to have a child labor force. After that critical thing has been established, then it requires removing the honey from the hive, and requires another piece of equipment I don't have here, but the honey, I have pictures up here you can look at from the early days of beekeeping in the Santa Monicas, and a book that my grandfather had, Beekeeping in the 1880s. This is what the frame of honey would look like. This is a really nice new comb in here. And all those cells are filled. You need, once it comes into the warehouse in a box like this called a super shell. See that? And then the frames are removed after you remove them from the colony using a thing called an acid pad that has a product on it called Bego, and the bees don't like the smell of it. It turns into a vapor. It's on a pad that is got black tin on the top and felt underneath it, and you sprinkle it on there and you put it on the hive on a warm day. It vaporizes. The bees don't like it. They move down. You can pull the whole super off with no bees in it if you're lucky, and take it into your extracting facility, which could be your garage. And then the frames come out, and it's best to use a tool called an uncapping knife that these days is electrically heated, and you shave off the cappings of the comb. Then you put it into, generally if you're going to do it in your backyard or your garage, best not to do it outdoors. You'll have too many wild bees snooping around. And you spin the honey out into the, it's a tank and a cage that spins around there, centrifugally spins the honey out of it, and you drain it out of there into your bucket, and there's your honey. That's how it's done, and the most simplistic way I can explain it. Any other questions? Yes? It's just a preferential choice. It's best not to paint your hives black because that gets too hot and can melt the wax. It makes it difficult for the bees to actually maintain a certain temperature and humidity condition inside the hive for its general health. White is refractive and it keeps the colony a bit cooler. Although any I use pale green, and there's some beekeepers paint their hives pink. As long as it's a light color, it's fine. But darker colors are problematic for the bees in terms of maintaining a status that I don't know what the mean temperature is inside of a colony, but it's one of the reasons they go out and gather water. You see them at the beach, they like the minerals, they'll fly a long way to go to the beach. They really love the beaches. And everybody's probably stepped on a bee at the beach. That's why they're there. They like the minerals. But they bring the water back and they regurgitate the water and they beat their wings and they fan it, so they have a form of air conditioning inside the hive. Swamp cooler. Yes?
Do bees keep going 24 hours or do they sleep?
Do bees keep going 24 hours? They go through a restful period. I wouldn't necessarily say they dream a lot. But they have, when they're in a honey flow, they stay pretty busy all night evaporating and fanning the honey to evaporate the moisture off of it so that it can become honey. It's nectar to begin with, of course. And once they dehydrate that down to, I think it's, 15% moisture? Is that correct?
Yeah, it's
15, 16, 70% moisture. Then it actually is honey. Prior to that time, it's nectar. And if they don't dry it down, it will ferment. But once dried down, it's basically it's antibacterial to a large part, and will remain honey as long as it doesn't become saturated with water. But that's why they cap the cells. It's sealed. They've got it bottled in a sense. Yes. When after the extraction and the comb is empty, it's usually still got quite a bit of honey in it. It's sticky, it's messy. It would draw. It's a little bit of a problem to store because other insects and other bees want to come, quote, rob it out. Bees are also. They go through a bandit phase, which you're pulling honey off. They get the scent of it, particularly if there's not a honey flow going on and you're at the end of that and you're trying to get the honey off the bees. They smell that and they follow you around. They seem to know exactly what you're going to do because you pull the lid off, whoop, they jump on it, and they are really very aggressive about robbing honey off of another hive. They have their riots in a sense. And raid the store, as it were. So I like to take the comb back after the extraction is done and stick it on the bees at nighttime. And then pull the lid off, put the comb on. They come up. It's party time. They got all this free honey, and they'll just go up there and they'll dry it all out and restore it down near the brood. Brood being the young bees that they're at the center of the colony.
I'm going to say if there are any more questions, if people could come up afterwards and ask Gary, Delmar, Daniel, or John, but I know that some people have to get going. Susan has one more question she's dying to ask. She'll be the last question. And I want to thank Gary and everybody for coming tonight, too.
Thank you very much. Yes.
I'm working with John, and I found out why the bees come. Because they don't know the words to this song.
Be serious.
All right. I wanted to say one last thing that I didn't say before was that pheromone, when the stinger rips off, it smells kind of like bananas. Have you experienced that?
It smells like bananas.
And that's when you're really marked, when you smell that banana smell. The other thing was, I think nectar to honey is like 20-1, something like that.
Something like that, yes.
And I think like maple syrup's like 16-1 or something, but they're different ratios that it's condensed down and evaporated.
As I understand it, that's where the term "going bananas" comes from. Has nothing to do with monkeys. It's a beekeeping term. It's when they go crazy and you smell bananas and you know they're coming for you. Really? Yeah. Yes, that's it? Yeah.
I want to thank everybody, our guests. Let's give them a big hand. I want to thank Rebecca for finding them and putting on the program. I want to thank all the people who came early and volunteered and set this all up. It did not happen by itself. Let's give them a hand. And finally, I want to thank you because I know a lot of you will be good people and stay and help us clean this up. please do. We're all tired, so we could use a hand. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's live in a hideout at Topanga. Come on, let's head out to them hills. Lots of stained glass, cold water in the bath. We can live without those fancy frills. Let's live in a tree in Topanga. Maybe in the leaves they'd leave us be. We could live in a squirrel hole and play our rock and roll. Come out on the limb and you can't be a nut like me, yeah!